Hey everybody. Yesterday's Cyberpunk video generated some good comments. I'm not going to read any of them now. Hopefully I will in an upcoming video. But, you can go and read them. Also, David Shapiro, who's somebody I follow pretty closely on the topic of AI, the day after I posted my sort of rambly off-the-cuff Cyberpunk video, he went and posted a live stream that had, a prepared slide deck and was clearly very... very well researched and borrowed heavily from this book, the title of which I don't have, completely committed to memory, but it's on screen here with me, and it's got the words neoliberalism and cyberpunk in the title, and his definition of cyberpunk just is neoliberalism. And he made a pretty good point, which was that, neoliberalism sort of became the dominant ideology, even if, not completely acknowledged or named, in the 1970s, which is when the compensation to workers and GDP diverged, and worker compensation has remained flat since then, while GDP has continued to climb. And he says that, neoliberalism started in the 1970s, and cyberpunk, as a literary genre, began in the early 1980s, and as a result. And again, from my perspective, probably not as a clear understanding that that's what was going on, but the writers in that era were responding to and extrapolating from the lived reality of the early 1980s. Anyway, that's not what I was going to talk about in this video. In this video, I just watched several episodes, or segments, not episodes, segments of The Hill, of Rising on the Hill, which used to be the Sagar and Jetty and Crystal Ball show. I have to say, I find that show more entertaining than Crystal and Sagar now, just because I love the dynamic between Robbie and Brianna. Usually I hate when hosts on a show just argue with one another, but when these two do it, it's so entertaining. Anyway, they were not exactly arguing, but Brianna was just on a jag. She seemingly despises Vivek Ramaswamy, who did very well at the Republican debate. Now, I want to say up front, I live in Arkansas. It does not matter who I vote for in a presidential election. This state's 6 electoral votes will go to the Republican candidate. Maybe I'll vote, maybe I won't. I don't care. I'm not advocating for either party. I'm not advocating for any particular candidate. I've only known about Vivek Ramaswamy for a couple of weeks, I think. And I still have not listened to a long-form interview with the guy. I've heard snippets from various interviews. I've heard, debate highlights. I don't have a dog in this fight, but Brianna was really vehement in her condemnation of the guy. And Robbie was not necessarily a champion, but, a bit more measured, I would say. But the dynamic between them was just hilarious. I'll post a link to this particular segment. I'm not suggesting you watch it, but if you want to, I've made it easy. But some of the things that really pissed Brianna Joy Gray off about Vivek Ramaswamy and his performance at the Republican debates had to do with, well, one, his stance on climate change. Like they played tape of him from the not too distant past, basically saying he believes climate change is real and he believes that it is anthropogenic. It is caused by human activity. But then in the debate, he made a bold declaration. He said that the climate change agenda is a hoax. This is a very Slick Willy thing to say. This is a very, hair-splitting technicality. You can say, I think that the agenda is disingenuous. I personally think that as it is played culturally, from the left, and also in actual politics, electoral politics on the Democratic side, which, I hesitate to call the left, clearly it's a disingenuous agenda. But that doesn't mean that you can change the composition of the atmosphere willy-nilly and it will have no effect on the climate. That just doesn't even make sense. I'm not a chemist, I'm not an atmospheric scientist, but I understand the heat trapping properties of atmospheric carbon, in the form of carbon dioxide. over time, over geological eras, the amount of atmospheric carbon goes down. It gets locked up, in the bodies of little plankton critters living in the ocean, and most of them, they decompose at the surface, and that carbon returns to the atmosphere. But some of them do sink to the bottom, and they do accumulate on the bottom, basically as limestone, or under the right conditions as oil or natural gas or whatever. But the carbon that is locked up in the ground, a lot of it came out of the atmosphere at one point. But that is a process that plays out over geological timescales. All of human history, all of human evolutionary history is insignificant on the times, compared to the timescales on which these processes significantly draw down atmospheric carbon. So, you can't just say, hey, we'll let nature take care of it. You'll be long gone. You and everybody you know, and everybody who's ever heard of you, and anybody you know, or your civilization will be long gone before nature gets, around to that on her to-do list. But Vivek Ramaswamy, in a very, I want to say like Tricky Dick or Slick Willie or just like slick Dick move, he tries to say that the agenda is a hoax. Well, the word hoax just doesn't work there. You can say the climate change agenda is bullshit. You can't say it on, on network TV, but you can say that and it's coherent. But to say that the climate change agenda is a hoax, that word hoax just, I don't care how legalistic you get in the parsing of your terms, that just sounds like you're saying climate change is a hoax. Your insertion of the word agenda there does not get you out of that. What else did she not like about him? He lied about his status as a poor immigrant whose parents came to this country with no money, and they made successes of themselves. So that's bullshit. His parents were Brahmins from India. They're the highest caste. Most people who come here on tech visas are from that caste. It is not a meritorious system on the ground there deciding who gets to come to America on the Indian side, But his parents were both very successful professionals with, careers in good standing. His father, I think, was a patent attorney. His mother is this practicing psychologist, and they didn't come here penniless. They're not a Horatio Alger story. The thing is, I think Republican voters would be fine saying, yeah, my parents worked hard, they got professional degrees, they established themselves in their careers, and then they came to the United States. They chose to come here. They could have been well off in India. They chose to be here. That's a perfectly legit story and something that nobody would hold against him. But no, he's got to say, oh, we came here penniless and we made everything from nothing. You didn't. You didn't. That's bullshit. So it probably sounds like I'm on Brianna's side. Here's the thing. And this has to do with the indictment of Donald Trump. And I've been watching stuff on that as well. I'm not carrying water for Trump, but at the same time, most of the attacks against him that I hear are bad faith attacks that, don't really touch on, the magnitude of his offenses, or really, are not properly focused on the things that he's done wrong. And some of them are quite petty. There's a lot of talk about his height and weight as reported to the sheriff's department, when he surrendered himself for processing. The United States of America. Is it a democracy? Well, we have these democratic rituals, which are supposed to provide legitimacy and cover for the fact that no, this is a representative republic, and really it's a gerontocratic oligarchy. Your vote, if you're just a working class schlub, who you vote for makes zero difference in terms of important policies that, government policy that shapes your life. The desires of the heads of industry, the desires of, the big players in finance, the desires of the defense contractors, these are the people whose wishes and whose will is enacted by the government, in policy. Your position on anything, it does not matter. There was Curtis Yarvin is a monarchist. He believes that we should have a CEO of the United States, and that person should be able to, bequeath their throne to their offspring, that monarchs have long-term skin in the game, whereas somebody who's just elected to serve a term of office doesn't really look beyond that term of office. And he thinks that we should get away from democracy. I think that's incoherent, because I think we have democracy in name only already, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing. It could be that the United States gets to reinvent itself every 80 years or so, because we have this charade or this facade of electoral democracy, which legitimizes the various ways in which power is gathered and in which it is maintained and exercised, and by which it changes hands. And voting is just not, elections are just not, they're just not. That's not what it's about. The 2020 election, was it stolen from Trump? I don't fucking care. It's a meaningless question from my perspective. Did he comport himself well in the situation? Fuck no. No, he screwed the pooch. He probably won't go to prison, but if he does, it will be his own doing. At the same time, waiting until the electoral process for the next cycle has started in order to initiate legal proceedings against him, I'm not going to say that it is election interference, but to the Republican base, it certainly appears to be, extra legal interference in the election, in favor of the Democrat Party. And you can't you can't say we're just administering the law blindly. It's never administered blindly. It's never, ever administered without regard for the standing of the person, who is being charged with a crime, and, the punishment that they are being assigned. There are people rotting in prison right now for the exact same crime for which Hunter Biden got a slap on the wrist. It is not administered fairly. So if you, in your own mind, administer it fairly, but with weird timing, which really looks as if you are putting your thumb on the scale, or in some way, interfering with an election in favor of one candidate or the other, you can't claim foul, when people don't buy it. At the same time, do I think the 2020 election was fair? I don't think any election is fair. I think the 2020 one had an extra layer of bullshit on top in the form of mail-in ballots, but every single election is run on the basis of completely, anti-democratic gerrymandering. Districts are carved up in absurd ways, in ways that make no sense whatsoever, in order to cluster voters in certain ways so that one party or the other can prevail in a given state. And then, the means that people have to vote are not uniform. Some people have to wait hours to vote, and every time I've ever voted, I just walk right in. I've never had to stand in line. I've never had to show ID. I just walk in, I tell them my name, they find my name on a list, they say, here's your ballot. In Arkansas, they say, do you want a Democratic ballot or a Republican ballot? And I haven't decided which one I'm going to ask for. The primary. But no election in the United States in my lifetime has been conducted in what I would consider to be a fair, legitimate, transparent way. In the past, the tension wasn't so high, the animosity wasn't so just absolute and boiling, and so it wasn't as big a deal. But we need to realize that, one, the Republicans started this shit with Barack Obama. The Republican leadership, in 2008, when Barack Obama was first elected, they basically said, we are going to prioritize making this man a one-term president and a failure over the good of the country. Good of the country is of a distant secondary concern to us compared to making this guy fail. And to deny that there was a racist element to it is just, it's like saying that the Democrats are playing fair now. They're not. But, for 8 years, the Republicans practiced all this dirty pool against Barack Obama. And so when the tables were turned, when there was a Republican that a lot of, establishment Republicans hated, but the Republican base loved, the Democrats not only carried on the tradition that the Republicans had started under Obama, but they ratcheted it up. They took every opportunity to defeat the man outside of the context of an election to remove him from office. They made multiple attempts to remove him from office on trumped up bullshit excuses. I mean, think back to his dealings, with the Ukrainian leadership now. Look at that in light of what we know about, what Hunter Biden was doing, what he was up to in terms of his business practices and involving his father in them, basically selling access to the vice president of the United States for 50 grand a month was the price that we heard. That's what he was getting as a salary for being on the board of Burisma. But that was just one gig, and that was like the entry price. He kept asking for more, and he kept getting more. And he had that, gigs like that going all over the place. And Joe Biden was a part of it. So, again, it might sound like I'm on the Republican side now. I'm not. They are two factions of the same oligarchy. Fuck them all. But at the same time, don't destroy the system, because corrupt stability is better than chaos. Chaos is a ladder. Chaos is an invitation to the worst among us to take their shot. Okay, I got to keep this under 20 minutes. So I'm going to be really quick about this last part. I can do a whole video on it if you like. Is the United States an empire? Yes. Is it an official empire with an emperor? No. That's a good thing, because one of the problems that empires have is there's not a clear process for secession. This was really a problem for the Roman Empire. You would get the Praetorian Guard killing one emperor after another so that the new incoming emperor would shower them with favors, and then when they needed more money, they'd kill him too. But, there was no established process for determining who would be the next emperor. And so it was always kind of a power grab. When an emperor got old or died by other means, it was chaos, and chaos is a ladder. So it was basically just polling the available candidates for the most venal, the most power hungry, the most ambitious, the most energetic, to see who's going to get the ring this time. We don't want that. That's bad. That's not a good way to go about things. So, but that said, is the United States an empire? Well, inasmuch as the United Nations is an empire, an empire is a multinational governance system where one player is, it's not a confederacy of equals. There's one dominant player, and then there are client states under it. Without the U.S., does the UN have any sort of effective enforcement mechanism? The enforcement mechanism is the United States military. If the U.S. is not a part of the UN, is the UN even a thing? I would say that the UN is largely just an administrative apparatus of the American empire, and it serves a function in that respect. And that life under empire is more peaceful than life under international anarchy. More people die under international anarchy than they do under imperial rule. So, is the U.S. an empire? Yes. Are we a well-managed empire? We could do better. Okay, I'm going to stop. Talk to you later. Let me know if you'd like for me to expand on any of that, or if you object, or if you agree, but you think I missed something. Any of that, let me know. Talk to you later.